Hello, welcome to Dundrol's podcast. I'm your host, Justin. So today we're going to react to Goodreads reviews for Richard C. Meyer's Jawbreakers Lost Souls, which I think it was his first Kickstarter that he did. I could be wrong on that. But yeah, I used to be a fan of like diversity in comics until like he started and he did like what a lot of like comic skaters did, which is just like have crowdfunder after crowdfunder. And it's like, okay, if you constantly I know people are gonna be like, oh, if people want to support if creators want to fund their stuff independently, you know, that's a good, they have the right to do that. But do they have the right to constantly e-bag and like take advantage of their fans? One, I just think, you're never going to be able to compete with, which the whole point of Comicsgate was to compete with the, you know, the main two, DC and Marvel. You're never going to compete with DC and Marvel if one, when you can't even put out a book a month, not a book a month, a book a year, much less a month, which you would need to do at least a book a month to compete with DC and Marvel. Let's be fucking real. And two, you know, like having like, which Richard C. Meyer I think has done like at least like 22 crowdfunders by now, and each one they keep getting the asked amount keeps getting lower and lower, which that even tells people I was right. Hey, if you keep e-bagging every time, you're gonna have people who are gonna get fed up and then like leave, and you're not gonna get new people, right? So he's bleeding. He's bleeding like subs, right? Supporters. Which the fact, like, which honestly, the fact that, you know, these people can do more than 2 crowdfunders just shows how fucked up the internet has become, where like people are just used to being treated like, fans have just been used to being treated like piggy banks, like marks, because like honestly, dude, if you have to, the fact that you did like 2 crowdfunders a row tells me, hey, you're not making enough money off these books to produce sequels, to produce other stuff. The fact that you have to e-bag every time you want to put out a new book tells me you don't have a big enough audience to fucking, you know, that you're not like making a lot of money doing this, right? Which there are people like the Hut who say like Richard C. Meyer is actually homeless and living with people. I don't know if that's true, but yeah. So let's just start reading the reviews, which I honestly wanted to get this book because back in the day, because it looked kind of cool. It was like kind of like a mix between like Suicide Squad and like, you know, like Image kind of comics where you had like superhero like soldiers and shit. So like that, yeah, it looks cool. So the premise for this book, before we read the reviews, are the Jawbreakers are a group of ex-superheroes turned mercenaries. After burning bridges with the CIA while operating in the Middle East and losing their lucrative security contracts in Europe, they find themselves working as monster hunters in Africa. Okay. So here's Blake, which I'll say this, collectively this got like a 3.68. So it's technically better than average. This is out of 5. So technically better than average. There's 23 reviews. So Blake gave it a 4 out of 5. A group of superheroes face off against a King Kong scale ape only to discover their pawns in a larger game where friends become enemies and enemies become friends. Tucked in the back are 2 bonus stories featuring a hostage rescue and the first part of a story where our powerful but B-level heroes face off against the technological God King. Incredible style. I've been following your boy Meyer since about June of 2018. Oh my god, this guy's a noob. As he exonerated in the comic book industry for its various faults, and I think between this and Iron Sights, the clearest thing illustrated is the vast gulf between criticism and creation. Now this is a fun book, and I think he hits his target in a lot of ways. The physical quality is great, even with the vestigious, what is that? Vicissitudes? I don't even know what that is. Putting this together, he has made good on the promises of his crowdfunding campaign, but in the end, the comics matter of your boy tradition. I'm going to dig in a bit. I wanted to say that there were a lot of people that were not happy with his first campaign, and then like dropped and like stopped being friends with him, like Captain Cummings. John Mayland's line work is good. John Mayland did the art. Okay, is good in that it's precise, emotional, and reads well. That said, it's not exactly to my taste. Partly, this is the nature of the characters. We're supposed to be older and somewhat haggard. Even when we meet Zaxi, for example, she's stunning and tends to be throughout until we see her in fear or anger. Then she takes on an exaggerated, harsh aspect, like the other characters seem to throughout. Also, the bodies are very much in a 90s style, and I'm finding e.g. Jack Kirby's work in Jack Kirby's Fourth World Omnibus more to my taste. I didn't read the comic books much in the 90s, but when I did, I felt like the idealized figures were overblown. That didn't bother me too much. Brett Smith's coloring is near perfect. The only quibble I had was that it's very dark, especially up front, but it's all very, very nice to look at. Eric, oh my god, how long is this guy's fucking review? Eric, lettering is crisp and clean and easy to read, except at one point. For thoughts or spooky psychic voices or whatever, it's light blue like a rough draft cover, and these old eyes like had a devil of a time reading them. So this is an old guy. This would be a 5-star book, but as I said, there's a gulf between critic and creator, and Meyer's just now starting to cross it. I know some stuff about the creators from his YouTube channel that I would not have picked up from the book, and so I ended up with a lot of questions. And the classic cartoon series, The Powerpuff Girls, the very first episode features Mojo Jojo turning the people into dogs. It's delivered sort of in media res, as if we've been watching the show all along, and we all knew and hated Mojo Jojo, and understood exactly what was possible in the universe of the city of Townsville. In 12 minutes, you got such a good feel for what was going on. By that second half of the episode, you were thinking of course, Sudoku is trying to win over the professors to get at the girls. These were broad comedic and comic archetypes, of course, but by the end of Jawbreakers, I was not really sure what our heroes could do. I didn't really know why Cuffs was called Cuffs, though I did get that he was super strong. Silk has some kind of psychic powers, sort of like light Green Lantern style. Hell Priest can see evil, but I couldn't keep straight whether or not he was actually blind. Someone finally says outright that he is in the last book, but it was hard to see how it was of any kind of disadvantage. I think he snipes at one point. Knife Hand was pretty clear and cooler than I expected. I still don't know what Devil Dog actually does. It's a lot to try to put into 56 pages. Holy fuck, 56 pages? 56 pages, and I've seen this go for like more than 20 bucks. Oh my god. Sure, and I didn't bother to call a graphic novel and it's only 56 pages. Sure, it didn't bother me as much as it should have because the characters were actually pretty strongly drawn, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the first struggle of art is to realize that the audience is in your head and they don't know anything you don't tell them. A story has to have some room to breathe, especially in inaugural stories like the first issue of Superman, trying to communicate this idea of a superhero to a mass audience, and that may not have had a strong reference for the idea at all. We don't have that issue today, obviously, but we do recognize that different universes have different rules, and we don't necessarily know what the rules are here, which drains some of the drama. There are a couple of dramatic beats missed that Ethan Van Sciver pointed out in his video review. The discovery of the giant ape could have been stretched out to greater effects. Zaxi and Cuffs were sort of instantly bonded. Over the past couple of years, I gained increasing respect for those who are able to tell a full, compelling, fun story in 56 pages, much less than 24. If we're going to take these matters seriously, Meyer makes the argument we're going to also have to be very demanding. That said, I did love the story. It was ballsy, bold, and fun. The second two stories were also a lot of fun, and it's clear that the author cares a whole lot about what he's doing, who his characters are, and whether the audience is having a good time. As such, I expect Mayer's journey crossing the Gulf into master craftsmanship is going to be a lot of fun to watch. You'd be wrong there, my friend. First off, in your review, you went into a lot of detail how you don't even know what a lot of the characters can do or what the extent of your powers, but then you're saying at the end, like, oh, the characters, you can tell that they fought the characters through. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Alexander Carpenter gave it 3 out of 5. Very meh. Most of the artwork is good enough to pull it from 2 stars to 3, but the story isn't strong enough. The story is all over the place, and characters are thrown in with no notion of a point to them. The main team is weak and has no substance. All this doesn't make for a terrible story, but it's a bad cliches that do this. The story is all over the place, and characters are thrown in with no notion of a point to them. The main team is weak and has no substance. Oh, sorry. Am I repeating myself, or he did? The story is all over the place. Characters are thrown in with no motion of the point to them. The main team is weak and has no substance. All this doesn't make for a terrible story, but it's bad cliches to the bad cliches that do this. The only black character in the team is a 1970s character of a black man, and none of the humor works, which changes it from funny to plainly racist. I sort of get where Meyer was going with this by throwing in the odd references to him, trying to be cool and fulfill people's expectations of him, but it doesn't work, especially when he does full Ollie G and asks, is it because I'm black? And Zoxy, I won't even attempt to dissect. I could try to speak about each character, but there just isn't any point. It's not worth it. All that being said, there are some good ideas in this book. I like the general idea of the team, but it feels weighted by lack of experiences on writer's part. It feels a little too much like The Boys, but carried out badly. How the fuck? Like, I fucking hate these noobs in comics. They compare everything to modern shit that's, like, you know, popular. How the fuck is this team like The Boys? The Boys aren't mercenaries. The Boys are anti-superhero vigilantes. These are supposed to be mercs. Ex-superheroes that became mercs. I do think that Hellpriest could be a decent, likable character with some backstory. Oh no, I wouldn't recommend it. It took me about 45 minutes to get through, but it would be a waste of 15 minutes, let alone 45. It seems like someone really wanted to write a comic, but unfortunately hasn't got enough good ideas. Sometimes it's okay to take inspiration from other media, but pretty much everything felt like it's been done before. A real shame really, but it shows why indie titles aren't mainstream. Why did you give it a 3.5 though? Just based on the art? Okay. Lots of reread. Okay, so Matthew Duncan, who's obviously a noob, gives it a 5 out of 5. Lots of reread potential here. Great action story with great art. Just what a comic book should be. Name Redacted gave it a 4 out of 5. The first stories, and especially fun sci-fi action romp, and even had some pretty funny lines. The romance does feel a bit too quick as long as you ignore the actual motivations of Zaxi. I get the feeling people complaining about that just weren't reading it too carefully. Also, people complaining about Cuff's dialogue, don't know his backstory, a white-collar criminal pretending to be a gangster because he's insecure and wants to live out a childhood blaxploitation fantasy, which isn't fully revealed here. So how can you give people shit for hating a character when you just said that backstory wasn't like revealed all the way. Like, come on. The second story is a revised and redrawn version of the first Jawbreaker story. The art is okay, more in the line with 1980s G.I. Joe, which that's a lot of people like point out that this book, that this comic book rips off a lot from like G.I. Joe comics, which I've never read. I mean, I have read some G.I. Joe comics, but I haven't read like old G.I. Joe comics. I think I read like one by, I think, Max Brooks, the guy from not Max Brooks. I think Max Brooks, the guy who wrote how to like Zombie Survival Guide or whatever the fuck, which is the point, I suppose. And the pacing is actually better than the newer story, but it's also sadder and darker. Highlights again include Cuffs, this time caught up posing dramatically in the middle of a firefight because he's completely invincible and forgets that other people are still in danger. The first story is my favorite, balancing the lighter side of the first and darker side of the second with a perfect... Wait, you have a black character who can't be harmed? So they're ripping off Luke Cage. Then again, I'm reading like Wild Cards right now, and there's a character who's kind of like that, but like well, it's more like he has like a healing factor, but like, you know, the downside is, you know, he gets like bounce back, which is just like when he goes to sleep, you know, he feels like his body shakes like hell, like in response to all the damage he takes. I don't know, whatever. We'll talk about that when I do that review. With a perfect fusion of the classic art style, the later and new sleeker art style of the former, it's crazy, it's wild. It has some classic 1960s Batman style villains, etc. Sold. Okay. Corey Hodgson, 1 out of 5. Possibly the second worst comic I have ever read. The character Saxy is nothing of substance, just boobs, a damsel in distress, a Judas, and a damsel in distress again. The one black member of the team talks like a character of a stereotype from a 1970s movie. The plot jumps all over the place. The art looks like someone wanted to copy Rob Liefeld, but Kane failed miserably. I think he meant to, at one point he meant to say it, but came close, but then wanted to write, but failed miserably, and he forgot to, like, he didn't like backspace, like, you know, all the shit he typed. Happens to me all the time. He has no concept of anatomy or panel layout. All in all, if you paid $25 for this, you were ripped off. Unluckily, the offer sent me mine for free because even though I canceled my order for the book, he refunded my money and sent me a copy anyway because he wanted to torture me by having me actually read his piece of trash comic. This got 5 likes. Okay, Lyle Coleman gave it a 1 out of 5. This is a combination of 3 separate stories. Each has the same writer and each has a different artist. First story, fairly bland G.I. Joe ripoff. Elite commando team, the Jawbreakers, infiltrates enemy base, frees hostages. The art, drawn by the writer himself, is just above passable for an independent comic book. Writing is boring and uninteresting. Honestly, not much more to say here. Second story. Oh boy, now we're talking. First, the art. Since this particular story was the main push of the book, the title and cover being about this story, the writer farmed out the art to a professional. For those of us that have been reading comics for a few decades, the art here is very reminiscent of 90s art. Not the big name, mega popular artist you love, but the guy that replaced said artist when he was moved on to something else. Remember that feeling before the internet kept fans alert of creative teams changes on books? Of picking up a book only to discover that the superstar artist that had drawn the previous issue and even did this issue's cover had been replaced by someone trying their darndest to ape the superstar style. Remember how how there were droves of not ready for prime time artists thrust onto major publishers' books because superstars were leaving the big two, Marvel, DC, in droves to make creator-owned books. Oh, he's talking about the Image era. The artist here would fit into the bottom of those fill-in artists. Hands look weird, drawing feet is avoided, body proportions are out of whack. The art here is genuinely terrible. Luckily for the artist, the writing is just as bad, so he doesn't have to take all the blame. There's an attempt to make the commandos have personalities, but it's so laughably bad that it comes off as someone doing a caricature of a mockery of a bad stereotype. There's a martial artist character that doesn't speak. A 100% ripoff of G.I. Joe's Snakes. He means Snake Eyes, but he wrote Snakes. We know it's Snake Eyes. Named Knife Hands. There's a character I had to go over the story 3 to 4 times. Cuffs. 3 to 4 times before I realized was supposed to be blind. There is a female whose sole purpose is to wear skimpy clothing and to really drive home the Africans are nothing but savages. The one black team member is named Cuffs, as in he only has superpowers when he's in shackles. Wait, stick with me here. It gets worse. He has a catchphrase. It's, "I'm about to rock this fool with the power of 1,000 slaves." Just in case you're still wondering if the writer was inept or simply trying to force in some form of racial political statements here, there are multiple... it's funny because he's a black man that voted for Republicans jokes. All this makes for either bland or horrible stereotyped characters fighting King Kong. There is an attempt to give the main character some sort of arc, but it fails completely flat, as there is no more than a few panels dedicated to this. Same with the almost naked female savage African woman. Their teams picks up and is later betrayed by, for what reason we'll never know. Third story. This story is part of a story that has to be continued at a later time. Yes, you just purchased a collection of stories bound into 122-page book. I heard it was only 56, but maybe this is a new edition. Because I heard there's like 2 editions of this book. Only to be left without conclusion. Since I spent so much time reviewing the feature story, second story, I will attempt to keep the review of this particular story brief. Art is an improvement. The artist on the third story is of a caliber that I could see him getting published by larger comic companies. Not quite ready to headline a feature Marvel or DC book, but would definitely not turn me off from buying this art in a Dark Horse or Image creator owned property. The writing, while not feeling like the writer is forcing an agenda as much, may actually be worse here. There are multiple pages where I had to turn back to see if I missed something, or if there were pages that had been stuck together. Nope, the story just randomly decides to take weird detours, or simply doesn't make any chronological sense. And yes, I am aware that the plot involves a god-like being manipulating reality, but it should still have some flow and be semi-intuitive to follow. There's a character revealed that comes so out of nowhere. I'm surprised the entire story doesn't have a whiplash warning printed on it. Imagine if Ghostbusters, Dan Aykroyd character, in the midst of a fantastic meeting of the Meyer scene, started reciting the "This is Spartacus" line from 300, and then grew wings and flew into the sun. As I said, completely out of nowhere, nonsensical. To top it off, the story simply stops. The abruptness of this was such that I actually contacted a few people I know that also bought the story to see if I was missing pages. One of the characters simply completes a statement, and the next page is the back cover. Not even to be continued or Jawbreakers will return message. Overall impressions and takeaways: the writer really doesn't know how to properly structure a comic. If this was some form of attempt to add an experimental comic, I would understand the lack of basic comic book necessities such as page turns. If you're unfamiliar with the term, feel free to Google comic page turns. Realistic dialogue, power of 1,000 slaves. Oof. Competent lettering. Letterer constantly, randomly bolding words for no reason at all. Coherent and complete story and less than one and a half dimensional characters. But since this is really an attempt at a fairly bland traditional action superhero comic, it's a total failure. I cannot recommend you purchase or even borrow a friend's copy to read this book unless you're interested in viewing and mocking bad comics like the crew of Mystery Science Theater and Riff Tracks, a watch and mock horrible movies. Wow, that guy was brutal. Let's clap for him. Evan Smalls, 1 out of 5. Sewage. Graham Bradley, 5 out of 5. Great art in Lost Souls great art in Lost Souls and good art in the other 2 stories. Good, cool comic. Michelle Clegg, 2 out of 5. I don't regret getting this because I want to support the indie comic scene. I think the major companies have really let their quality slip. That being said, this isn't that good. I don't really care about politics and the controversy involved. And while you can clearly tell it's written by someone leaning far in one direction, that's really not where it falters. The story is choppy and at times hard to follow, and despite the huge scale of events happening, it all feels kind of inconsequential. Somehow Lost Souls is much better in both story and art than the others, but it shares the same issues. I hope the quality improves if there is more Jawbreakers to come, because even with the issues, the characters are interesting. I'd like to see more of them. Okay, let's load more. George Isaacs gave it 2 out of 5. Not quite my idea of good comics. Good bang for a buck on page count, and as far as as crowdfunded comics goes, I was happy to support one of my favorite YouTube channels since I ad block. Also happy to help fund a lawsuit against someone who has made good comics but decided to abuse his position against folks he doesn't like. Okay, how do you feel now though when your boys Zach gave up on the lawsuit because he couldn't prove actually that he was hurt by Mark Waid's bullshit when people were like you were giving him free money. He could have made a point when he was like, hey, I can't get my stuff in stores, but because all of you guys were giving him free money, he had no leg to stand on. So there's no buyer's remorse, except I backed one other project before reading this and its follow-up, God King. On the other hand, things get a little better with the next volume. So it's kind of inspiring to watch someone grow in real time. Alex Murphy, 4 out of 5. I've been a fan of The Offer's YouTube channel almost from the beginning. His oh my god. Fuck these guys and their fucking long reviews, man. I've been a fan of The Offer's YouTube channel almost from the beginning. His criticism of how, in his opinion, the comic book industry has changed for the worse and chasing more progressive politics at the expense of characters and stories. While I don't agree with everything he mentions, you can see he's a massive fan of comics, and his criticism has made him some big enemies in the comic book industry. They challenged him to see if they could do any better, so he wrote one. If you follow his channel, they even tried to stop this from getting printed the way he wanted. He's had stuff published before. It's a Kickstarter just last year, but a few graphic novels he had published about 5 years ago. But this is his first real superhero classic comic that he's had the idea for a while. He even released a very early draft of Jawbreakers story when he started his channel, asking for it to be roasted to hell, which it was. With his comic reviews and take on the industry, he's got into contact with some big hitters in the comic business. The art for the first comic in this novel is by John Malin, who has done many big Marvel comics, and the quality of this first comic, it shows. The art for Lost Souls is very good, especially for a first issue and for what is essentially is an indie book. The story for the one-shot Lost Souls is that the Jawbreakers, a bunch of aged, super-powered mercenaries in a sort of mix of the Expendables with superpowers, have burnt their bridges in both the US and Europe and have gone to do contracts in Africa, hired by beautiful tribeswomen. They find themselves pitted against a giant interdimensional gorilla and the militia chasing it. The plot is nuts. A Godzilla-sized super ape traveling through alternate dimensions that a cyborg warlord wants to kill to get the gold weapons and armor that the gorilla has eaten from the armies that have attacked it. Throw in the fact that gorilla has lost its soul from traveling through interdimensional portals, and the Jawbreakers must capture the super gorilla, defeat the militia, return ape soul, and get it back through the right portal. Like I said, crazy. But it does it well. I was able to follow the story well enough with both the pacing and dialogue. Maybe the story making the story both easy to follow and enjoyable. The plot is one that could only really be told in a comic, and kind of being a mix of action and superhero stuff really appealed to my kind of taste. The characters are a mixed bag. I won't say there's a bad character, and it just seems like you're more drawn, or just appears to be more interesting. I think everyone's favorite is Hell Priest, a blind priest who's the team's sniper. Silkworm, a sort of disgruntled Spider-Man with his silk fiber generating powers and super strength, is decent as the leader of the group. His buddy cop relationship with Cuffs is good, and if improved would be a big boost, even if the jokes about him being the only black member can spill over into a bit of cringe. Both Devil Dog, who I think is a weapon expert / ninja type hero, and Knife Hands, whose power that his hands can cut through anything, look cool but never given any real depth like the others. They have two ninjas on the team? What the fuck? The villain is a bit standard, like villain from a decent superhero film. Serviceable, but not really a standout. The designs of the Jawbreakers are good, while the powers and style aren't exactly original. They are good to build the type of stories around what I think Meyer wants to write. In Zach's defense, the Watchmen, which we look today as great, characters, were archetypes of different superheroes, right? Comedian was based off Peacemaker. Rorschach was based off, not The Question apparently, but Mr. A was the Steve Ditko character. Ozymandias was people say Superman, but I'm not 100% sure. But I guess he's Superman. And Night Owl 2 is obviously Night Owl 1 and 2 is obviously based off Blue Beetle, right? Not Batman. For the people keep bringing up, oh, he's a better Batman than Batman. He's not based off Batman. The rest of the book is a redrawn, remastered version of his original Jawbreakers comic, which was meant to be their first issue, as it's based on the original. The standard in both art and writing from Lost Souls is massive, and has that more of an indie comic look than the new release. Here are essentially the first two comics in a larger story. I won't go on about this, as he has a new Kickstarter out writing the next volume of the story, but has intrigued by the world set up in this issue of the Jawbreakers being brought in after superheroes in New York being killed off. Judging from the Lost Souls story in its art, which is very good, and the type of stories that he seems to be aiming towards are up my street. While not the best comic I've read, it was fun and enjoyable to read, and I preferred it to Ironsides, his other comic. I'm looking forward to the next in the series, having already given to Kickstarter. It may not be everyone's taste, but credit should be given for Meyer answering his detractors by writing a half-decent action comic. Is it half-decent? I don't know. So Adam Teeter rated a 4 out of 5. Much improved review of the first Indiegogo paperback edition shipped. Okay, whatever. Richard C. Myers is in the forefront of current crowdfunded independent comics graphic novels movement. His primary YouTube channel called Comics Matter with your boy Zach. Oh my god. Okay. Yeah, that's too bad. We're only going to do short ones. Patrick rated a 4 out of 5. Strong 4. The main story, Lost Souls, assumes a little too much knowledge of the characters, but it is a solid, fun story with excellent art and colors. I like the God King story better as the characters are more fleshed out. So to speak, one gets a better sense of their personalities. Meyer writes as well or better than many professionals in the industry. It's a shame politics literally have gone in the way of more readers discovering him. Okay. Chrissy Moss gave it a 4 out of 5. Classic superhero story. How can it be a classic superhero story when he's going for like a 90s comic? Okay, but whatever. Well, I guess the character's fighting like a giant monster. Classic superhero story. There are superheroes, a bad guy, and some awesome battle scenes. I felt like a couple of things could have been added to make the plot a little smoother, but overall, an enjoyable read. I couldn't help but laugh at some of the antics and loved the twist of the giant ape. The bonus chapters at the end of the book were nice additions too. Wakisashi gave it a 4 out of 5. Let's see how long this review is. Okay. Imaginative, action-packed comic book fun with cool characters and some great art. I enjoyed each of the 3 stories, but my favorite was Lost Souls. This has been made with passion and love. I already backed the next Jawbreakers book on Indiegogo. Steve Turney gave it 4 out of 5. It's exactly what it sets out to be. A good, solid 90s style action superhero mercenary story. Fantastic looking book that is one of the coveted display locations in my collection. Recommended. Okay. Tony Once Told rated 5 out of 5. Great story, and I enjoyed it. True comic story. Alex Willie rated 5 out of 5. Exactly what it promises. 80s, 90s style over-the-top action. Plenty of beefcake and cheesecake. If you like Image, DC, or Marvel in the 90s, you'll like this. Oh my god. If you like, you know, what a lot of people consider the worst decade of comics ever, you'll enjoy this, which I do like. I like enjoy 90s comics, but I understand how bad that they were considered bad. Michael rated it 4 out of 5. Clearly a labor of love from someone who loves 90s and 80s, 80s and 90s style comic book action. Which Richard C. Meyer is old enough that he 90s, he would have been what, in his 20s during the 90s. So how can that be your favorite decade? I don't know. Lindsay Parks rated a 3 out of 5. I had $20 and now I don't. Why did you give it 3 out of 5? Dexter Lawson, 5 out of 5. Zach has shown true courage in the face of slanderous attack to almost personally bring integrity to the comic book industry. Astor Raffos, 4 out of 5. Just some guy said, there are shortcomings in a couple places where there seems like there are panels or splash pages missing. They end up putting the story with the little character introduction tags at the beginning of the second story and not in the first story, so that was a pain. I didn't care for the killing off of a certain character who didn't even get enough development to justify it. But all in all, a really good couple of stories. I bet the second one ends on a cliffhanger. Now I gotta wait forever for the next book. Minor complaints aside, I laughed out loud nearly a dozen times. All thoroughly entertaining read. This is what comics are meant to be. Blue Sapphire. This is the last one. Okay. Uh-oh. Aw, man. We only had one left. And I accidentally, okay, here's this. 4 out of 5. I can see the development in Meyer's storytelling and his political writing. Although it would have been less jarring to have all the stories drawn and inked by the same artist, it certainly shows improvement. I look forward to more. Okay, so that's all of them. Though I did skip one because it was like, dude, we already read a bunch of long ones, and this video is going to be like 40 minutes. So yeah, you can tell a lot of the fanboys. Let's be real, this would have gone a 2 out of 5 if a lot of the fanboys didn't come in with a lot of 4 to 5 4 out of 5 ratings, right? But you know, I haven't read this book, so I can't tell. It's hard for me to tell. Hey, does this book suck? Based on just what other people said about it. But yeah, from me, it seems like there's a lot of bias here, fanboy bias here, right? And like, yeah, I've been guilty of the past where like I know the circumstances behind like stuff, so I've been like, you know, a little generous with ratings, right? Especially when you can tell something was like a labor of love, like with the Spawn movie. I gave that movie like a 6.5 out of 10, when really it's probably a 3.5 out of 10. But yeah, it is what it is. So our next Goodreads reacts to, we're gonna react to Brian Michael Bendis like Superman run. All right, guys.